Yeah, appreciate y'all for tuning in, and all those that are viewing this, or if you're viewing it live, welcome right now. If you're going to be viewing it on the replay, thanks so much for checking this out. I am Ben Tyndall. I'm the executive director with Safe Family Farming, and we're really pleased to have several guests as we are tackling in our what we call our ag exchange conversation. We got a really good conversation as we have this past legislative session. I am calling in from Olympia. I am tuning in from Olympia right now, and hold on, wait for it. Yeah, you don't hear that? Hear nothing? Yeah. The legislative session is over, and it is very quiet in Olympia for the first time in about three or so months. And if you hear anything, it's a sigh of relief from perhaps our guests, Mark Struley and Caleb Werder, are two of the lobbyists that have been really working and having their finger on the pulse of what's going on here in Olympia and working this 2026 legislative session. We're going to pull them in here in just a second. But I do, before we dive in completely, I do want to take a moment and thank our sponsors, the Kennewick Irrigation District. They are the sponsors for the Ag Exchange conversation here. We are very appreciative and very thankful for the Kennewick Irrigation District for their sponsorship with and partnership with Safe Family Farming, but as well as their work day in and day out in the greater Kennewick irrigation area, in the greater Kennewick area, providing water and irrigation to properties and farm operations there in that region. So a big thank you to our sponsor for the Kennewick Irrigation District for helping make this conversation possible. And with that, I do want to welcome our guests. Caleb Werder, he is the Governmental Affairs Director with the Washington Farm Bureau, and Mark Struley is an agricultural lobbyist and a principal over at Struley Public Affairs. Guys, thank you both for jumping on board and being a part of this conversation. Really appreciate it. I hope that y'all have been able to get some a little more rest now that March 12th is behind us. But anyway, kind of let me start the conversation real quick. Let's dive in. We've given ourselves about an hour for this conversation that, probably will, people will be doing autopsies for weeks and months to come. So we'll see how much we can get accomplished in 1 hour. But give me a little bit of the feel, just kind of set what was the temperature? Caleb, I'll start with you, but this would go for both of you guys. What was kind of the temperature, the feel this session? Was this a positive session for agriculture? Was this one where you felt like y'all were always just playing defense? Was it a mix of both? Kind of give us a feel.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on, Ben. Really appreciate taking the time and helping provide this. Just another sliver of knowledge. We get it from everywhere. It doesn't matter what media you're consuming, but happy to be here. This session, I'm really going to say I've been doing this for a few years now. I've been a part of Farm Bureau for 6+. I think I like budget deficits. Agriculture usually comes out okay on the other side of budget deficits. Unfortunately, that also means both bad and good bills die. And like any session, we started really fast. You try to get a grasp of all the good and bad ideas coming down the pike. And sure enough, most of those died pretty early on, especially once we hit House of Origin cutoff. We knew what was going to happen the last 2.5 weeks of session, and everything slowed down.
Yeah, good. Mark, how about you? What was your perspective?
Well, yeah, I would totally agree. And by the way, thanks, Ben. Appreciate Safe Family Farming, and always appreciate the partnership and what you guys bring to it. I would totally agree with Caleb. I kind of call it the double barrel shotgun effect. One big old barrel of fear, and then there were a few good things too. So one barrel of a little bit of excitement, maybe some things that we hadn't necessarily expected that did come out in the end. We can get into that, but super stressful session. One thing that I really appreciated was what the ag unity this session, that so many different commodities, and so there's different lobbyists, and we all hung together, and we needed to, so that was great.
That is good. That's really good. Well, what was I'm curious for those that may not have, we have a lot of agriculture, a lot of farmers that really their focus, and you guys know it as well, their focus is to grow their crop or feed their animals, keeping a finger on the pulse and kind of the day in, day out of what's going on in Olympia really isn't, what they're doing. They're expecting you guys, they're expecting us to kind of help do that. What is the feel within the legislature around agriculture? It is agriculture. Do we have, some legislators, gals and guys that are, is agriculture respected? Does it have a good seat at the table, do you feel? Or, a lot of times we can hear about the bad bills that are coming or kind of looming over agriculture, and it can feel like, I guess Olympia just is out of touch and hates us. I don't know if that necessarily is the case, but sometimes that can be the perspective. What is the feel from your perspective, of course, but what is the feel within Olympia around agriculture?
Well, what I can say is, my grandparents grew up on a farm, Ben. My parents grew up on a farm, and so did I. But less and less generations have grown up on farms. Both Caleb and I did. We were fortunate to have that. But I've spent my entire working career here in Olympia. My kids did not grow up on a farm. You can see that in the legislature. People are more and more disconnected of where their food comes from and what it really takes to produce food and local food. And so it really behooves us to continue to want to educate folks. I think they're interested, but politically, that doesn't always obviously transfer to why they need to stand up for agriculture. So it can be pretty frustrating. I think you see the folks from the east side almost all get it. They're living it and breathing it over on that side of the state. And I will say more and more this session, we can get into that. We have some folks on the west side, and I'm not drawing a party distinction. Our House Chair of the Ag Committee, Christine Reeves, Mike Chapman, the chair in the Senate, solid folks, and there are others. Adam Birnbaum. You want to talk about Addison Richards. These are folks that brought key votes at times for agriculture, both against bad bills as well as pushing good bills for agriculture. But not to go on and on about that right now, but I would say we have to continue to keep food at the forefront, because that's what our guys do.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think over the last few years, when that House chair, Senate chair transition happened, relationships are continuing to improve with those chairs of the ag committees. Representative Reeves has gone out of her way to be a significant help to agriculture this year. Some of it has been through the food security lens, which we are fully supportive of. But going back to your question, Ben, our farmers just want to stay farming. And ultimately, that kind of comes down to understanding business basics and what we see in the different caucuses at the legislature. There was one House leader at one point during a conversation this year tried to familiarize himself with agriculture and empathize a little bit, saying that the pressures he was receiving from the governor on the budget was similar to the pressures that farmers as business people face every day. And it's a simple yet somewhat gross example of how there is a disconnect of the basic business that happens across the state of Washington. Particularly one of the last business owners that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong on this, was Senator Mark Mullet. He was one of the only business owners in the Democratic caucus. And now I believe there isn't a business owner in that caucus in the Senate currently.
Yeah. Well, I do want to kind of dive into a couple specifics and some of the legislation that was on y'all's radar. Before I do, and I maybe should have said this a minute ago, we have a handful of people that are tuned in and watching this. I do want to say, if any of those that are viewing, if you have questions for Caleb or Mark as we're chatting and having this conversation, feel free to type those into whatever platform you're watching this from. So if you're watching this from YouTube or Facebook, just type it in the comments. We have Dylan Honkoop, our communications director, who will be watching the chats and things like that, and we'll be able to pop those on. But if you do have any questions for either of these guys, please don't hesitate to take a second and type that in, and we'll try and get to them as we go. But with that, let me ask this, and Mark, I'll start with you, but this will go for both of you. What were kind of the going into session? What were the kind of bills on your radar? What was, or maybe the issue, as you were kind of walking into this? I know a couple months ago, before we went into session, we had Ben Buckholtz and Scott Dilley kind of giving us a pre-session, hey, here's what we think, and kind of, looking into their crystal ball. I don't know if the crystal ball was communicating correctly or not at the end, if everything panned out the way we thought it would. What were y'all watching for, and how did it play out? What were kind of high on your radar?
Yeah, well, those guys are great. We knew coming in, just from conversations, we knew obviously the income tax was going to be a big part of the legislature because of the budget situation and just the appetite. There'd been a long time, I think the majority party for a long time has communicated they wanted to pass an income tax. I would say right in December, we started hearing late December, like right before session, we started hearing rumblings about ag labor unionization. That made us, of course, quite nervous, but we were just hearing rumblings. There was not a lot of stakeholder outreach on that issue, which we can get into later. But that was right before session. The other one was environmental crimes. We knew for sure that was coming back, and we'd met with the prime sponsor. And the challenge for us in that kind of legislation was these things aren't amendable, right? They just were not fixable in the eyes of a rancher or a farmer. So those are the kind of things we knew were coming for sure. I mean, we're honestly, at least I go in, I know we're going to have to play defense. That's without question. Now, as it turned out in the end, we were able to play just a little bit of offense this year, and I'm probably getting ahead of the questions, but going in, we were nervous. We knew it was a short session, and frankly, they try to pack as much in the short as they do in the long, only you just don't have as much time,
So do you feel like, was there anything you felt like, with some of those that, we knew income tax, you knew about environmental crimes, you were aware of some of the unionization, possibilities that were thrown out there. Was there anything you felt like you had to kind of pivot, or, wasn't expecting that particular strategy, or coming in from that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say I don't know what other folks thought necessarily about the unionization, but after being promised the session before, because if everybody remembers, they unionized cannabis workers, and ag was told, this isn't about agriculture, for sure we're not coming back. And boom. There it was. So I can't say I was surprised, but really disappointed. It doesn't really create an environment where you feel like you can really work with folks. I think, some of the surprises this year that turned out for us, I think we came in high on our list was getting lubricants out from coverage underneath the Climate Commitment Act. We knew something like that would be a huge lift, and the chances would be pretty rare. And in the end, we were able to get that across the finish line. And, people, Mark Schessler, Tom Dent, but in the end, even, Democrats as well supported that, or it wouldn't have crossed the finish line. And that is huge for farmers to have that exempt. You're running a combine, or that some of those big tractors, you're buying your oil a couple barrels at a time. So that's what we're talking about: oil, hydraulic fluid, all that. So, it puts a little salve on the wound of the other things.
Yeah, no, that is good. That is good. Caleb, how about you? What were you and Farm Bureau? What were y'all kind of tracking and such? I'm sure some of the same things, but maybe a different angle.
Yeah, some of the same things, and I mean, it doesn't matter what the topic is. We're always nervous because we don't know. We're always nervous on bad ideas because you never know going into the session how much traction something's going to get. It may survive through committees or one chamber and sail through, and then all of a sudden you have less recourse to work in the opposite chamber or during floor sessions to apply amendments or get a striker going or something like that. So we're always expecting for it to be harder than it needs to be most of the time. But nonetheless, we do our best to prevail on behalf of agriculture. But a couple other bills we were tracking, working with Representative Reeves last summer through the interim. She had made it to several farm tours, not only from Washington Farm Bureau perspective, but across other commodity groups as well, and got several food security bills together and drafted that were dropped in December sometime ahead of session. So we knew what to expect there. We knew what, who, and how to work with some of those food bank, nonprofit type associations to help open up some of the channels where farmers can get more of their product into the food supply chain, even if it's not that first selected premium product or if it's overproduced, et cetera, and help on the food security side of things, getting food in front of people. And then also one thing that Farm Bureau was championed was what we called the Washington Farm Bill, which is a total oversimplification of what someone might think of the federal Farm Bill. But it is a relief package, and it has several elements in it, providing direct relief, putting money straight back into the pockets of farmers across the state, across several topics. Ultimately, it got a hearing very late in session, and it was in front of an unexpected committee, in front of the House Consumer Protection and Business Committee, which isn't a bad thing because it helps agriculture open up the lens and the audience who we're trying to communicate with. But it did receive a hearing, and we're planning on further interim conversations, not only Farm Bureau, but several other ag associations, and working with that sponsor to help refine it and get it prepared for next year on a new budget cycle that is hopefully better.
Good. No, and I would like to kind of talk about that bill in a minute. One, are there so that I know that as we were going into session, there were a couple of bills that we were looking at. The environmental crimes bill, the unionization. There were a handful of kind of unionization bills, and like you mentioned, Mark. Safe Family Farming, we've really tried to kind of not take so much a strong position on unionization in itself. It was more, we want to see farm workers protected. There was this question around card check, and is that able to be corrupted or coerced and so forth like that. And so just the farm worker protection side was really something we're very concerned about. And that kind of mixed messaging around, yes, this was something for cannabis workers. This is not going to be something that is going to be broadly across the board for agriculture. And of course, right out of the gate, it was blanketed across the board for all of agriculture. I think a lot of people, yes, we tried to let me work on my shocked face. I don't think any of us did that real well. I don't think it was shocking anyone. But with that, honestly, those bills did not make it across the finish line, which, for many that was positive. But I would assume, these aren't dead necessarily in anyone's mind, for in future sessions. What is the likelihood of some of these bills coming back? Are these things that you expect to see again in 2026, 2027, 2028, those kind of things? Moving forward in the interim and then into future sessions? Are these things that we should continue watching?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And thanks for stating it that way, Ben, because we weren't arguing on principle. We weren't opposing unions on principle. What we were saying is, when you're dealing with perishable food, the leverage, it just doesn't, it's just completely unfair. Right. And the second point, nobody clearly articulated to us, so what exactly was the problem? Who brought this? Because people would say, well, agriculture, you can't just say no. You have to come with a solution. And I'd say, tell me the problem, And I and I heard comments like this one knocked me over. Well, we want those farm workers to have pensions. Pensions? My farmers don't have pensions, And so there's just a complete, I think, misunderstanding of how this works out in the end. And again, I think we talked about it earlier, right before the show. I just came back from Eastern Washington on a 3-4 day tour, meeting with various clients, setting aside water concerns. Land is just going to sit fallow because you know what? It's not penciling anymore. It's not penciling. And, I've said before, and, when I was a kid, the adults bemoaned the dependence on foreign oil. And I will say, man, in my generation, we think that's problematic. You wait till foreign food. And because it's just not penciling for these guys. And when it doesn't pencil, it doesn't pencil. Yeah, you can have a big year, and sure, you can withstand 1 year, 2 year. But some of these guys are looking at 4 years of losses and not able to produce any kind of profit. It's not sustainable. And, I really want to give kudos to Derek Sanderson and the Department of Ag. Early in the session, Mike Chapman held a work session, and the director came forward and talked about the state of agriculture. And I'm glad they did that early, because that really sort of set the stage for us to say, yes, the Department of Agriculture has done the research. They have economists, and this is what they're finding. This is not a cyclical issue. This is a structural issue. We are losing, I know you guys go over the numbers, but it's also true. We're losing 2 farms a day. It continues. And those numbers were used a lot during the session. My fear, I know people that are in agriculture, they know it's true. I worry that it doesn't resonate necessarily with legislators, but it was, it's a big deal. And then they came out later with a report during session, an ag viability report, which tells the story. So it is really tough times, and friends, it's all real. This isn't just us saying, this isn't Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. It's all real. So
yeah. Well, Caleb, let me ask you this question, kind of along some of those bills that did die, but the likelihood of them coming back is fairly strong, and some of those, the unionization or environmental crimes, those are high on the list, but there are a number that you guys were tracking. Are there any kind of takeaways or lessons that y'all learned that, we want to be doing during the interim? Anything that we can learn from, what went down in this past session on some of these bills that, hey, let's have a stronger presentation, or that we can kind of build a better coalition? Anyway, I'll let you answer the question. What can we be doing over the interim to really kind of set ourselves up to address these maybe better?
I think some of these big bills really reflect the importance and engagement from all associations in the stakeholdering process. Thankfully, just to piggyback off unionization real quick, Senator Saldana, who has been a big proponent of the unionization, is retiring out of the legislature and moving on to her next endeavors. And it sounds like Senator Chapman will be taking those conversations over and holding some interim stakeholdering thing where we can really help explain what agriculture's perspective is, not being anti-union necessarily, but what are the nuances, all the pieces that were involved in those 4 bills that were dropped, and so on. And then even environmental crimes too, what the sponsor wants to call stakeholdering last minute in December was really, like Mark said earlier, it's not an amendable bill. The whole thing is an issue, and can totally understand the sponsor's efforts and why she has drafted this piece of legislation with the boat fires that have happened in her district and down in the Port of Tacoma, Commencement Bay area. But the relationship that she has with the Attorney General's office and the momentum that the Attorney General's office is bringing to this issue, and the low bar of threshold that would then encompass nearly all, if not, or most, if not all, farm practices when it comes to your herbicides and pesticides, when it comes to your, hopefully, accidental discharges when it comes to some of the cattle operations, or just standard grazing practices if there's snow out in the field. It really raises some serious concerns. But the stakeholdering process is where agriculture can improve on those relationships with key legislators within the legislature. And then also, like Farm Bureau's role, we're trying to find farmers that are facing those specific issues and get them to the table as well. Again, Mark and I have a role to play, but it doesn't mean that we have every single fact or nuance in our back pocket. We do our best to communicate with our membership and our clients to make sure that we have the current information. But sometimes at the end of the day, we just have to find that farmer and let the farmer tell the story, because that's that resonates most with legislators in both chambers.
Yes.
In district, out of district, it doesn't matter. It's just elevating what those nuances are. And there's a couple in my back pocket from members that we'll be looking to bring forward hopefully next year as well. Some issues that have arisen that we didn't have time this year because it was too late with some agency communication, but it'll be something that needs to be addressed in the future because it is money that is leaving farmers' pockets.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, and it's, I actually love hearing that, you're tapping into members, that you have some of the farmers and recognizing and trying to communicate. That's something we're trying to do through Safe Family Farming as well, is trying to help communicate to farmers. Your voice really matters. I know it can be a chore to, remove yourself from the field for a moment, and, but thanks to modern technology and, if there was a silver lining around COVID, maybe the remote testimony is one of them. But being able to say, it's very easy to engage, and your voice really has a lot of value, a lot of weight. You guys do a phenomenal job of communicating agriculture story, but it's the guys or the gals on the field that are actually telling their own perspective. That carries a lot more weight than as someone who's kind of paid to represent the industry. It's like, no, you're actually part of that community, and that carries a lot of weight. So I do want to share that with any viewers or anyone that may be watching this. Your voice matters, and we want to continue to beat that drum. And so
yeah,
maybe it's not necessarily in this conversation. Maybe the politics isn't your thing, or social media is not your thing. I'll tell you, when you're at the corner store or at the local coffee shop and you're with your group of farmers, your neighbors, etc., and you're all griping about the same thing, that's telling your story. It just takes one of those in the group. It's like, hey, go talk to so-and-so. They probably have the best perspective on this. Yeah. And then if that gets distilled up to us, then that's one way. It's not just social media. It's not just in front of the politicians. That's one way that we can help elevate some of those issues.
Yeah. No.
And I couldn't agree more on that. And it really makes it real when they're talking to the actual farmer. And they also get to discover, hey, we got things in common, which is, that really helps a lot. And I just want to chime in on the labor bill. Kudos to Christine Reeves again, because she amended that one bill. I think 2471 was the number. She amended that in the House, took agriculture out of it, so not to be covered under the National Labor Relations Act. Right. And so, we definitely want to be supporting moderates like that. It was just a really big deal that she helped out with that.
No, you're absolutely right. No, that is powerful, and that seems like one of the lessons. Lessons may not be the right word, but one of the things that comes out of each of these sessions is you really do find out, okay, here's who I can work well with, and here's who are, I don't want to necessarily say friends and enemies, but here's ones that are, like you're saying, are moderate. They're on, they see all these different angles and they can see different sides, and there's someone we can work with, and that has a lot of value coming out of a session when you really do kind of build those relationships and get a better handle on here's who our friends are, here's who we can work with, here's who we can really, I hope, make agriculture stronger with, as opposed to in spite of. So that's great.
Well, absolutely, Ben. And I will say in the Senate, Senator Deb Krishna Dawson Gabe was good to work with this session, and I'll just be straight up. I mean, and she knows I had clients that we did not support her in her recent election, and you know what? She didn't hold that against agriculture. She is the vice chair of ag in the Senate. She met with every client we brought, and her votes reflected that. She was a huge help this session. And I just want to be sure and give credit where credit is due. And I count that as a new relationship for us to work with going forward.
That's good to know. That's good to hear. It's good to hear. Well, you had mentioned it. I think Mark near the beginning. One of you mentioned, it's kind of helpful when it is a supplemental budget, and obviously the budget was a big talking point this year. Obviously, you talk about things like income tax or looking to kind of cover a large deficit. How did the budget? How did finances? How did potentially this, what we're looking at, an income tax that, may be in the court system for a while, but it appears to now be moving, toward the courts. It's now law to some degree. What exactly does the financial side or the budget and taxes, how is that potentially going to impact agriculture? That's a bit of a broad, question that, I'm sure you're amazing at reading the future, but from your perspective right now, March 19th, 2026, what can farmers be looking at? Caleb, I'll start with you, but this would be a question for both of you guys.
Yeah, budgets were interesting. And even with that income tax going through, it's not implemented until January 1 if it survives the court process, and then collections don't start until 29. And so what does this deficit actually look like? Likely ongoing, because the income tax isn't a silver bullet to solve it immediately. We have another 2-3 years if that starts to resolve any of it. And we've all heard in the media, is it a spending problem? Is it an income problem? Et cetera, et cetera. And agriculture would probably stand on the side of, yes, it's a spending problem. But ultimately, I see a deficit coming again next year. With some of the agency cuts that happened across the board, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Commerce, Department of Ecology, there were what could be referred to as small cuts. We're looking at the 2 to 5 million mark. It's a drop in the bucket for what needs to happen, essentially. And I'm not necessarily advocating to get rid of agency jobs or anything like that. It's just spending overall. What does it look like? What does it need to change into? But likely a deficit again next year. On the agricultural front within the budgets, we seem to have fared pretty well. There's specific things that stayed intact. Funding for Eastern Washington irrigation projects stayed intact. The riparian grant program stayed intact through State Conservation Commission. Those are all good things. As far as cuts, not aware of very large ones. I know there was at one point, and Mark might have more information on it than I do, but there were specific earmarks for some funding for West Side water and irrigation projects, which is super beneficial in the long run. Everybody thinks of irrigation more or less as being an Eastern Washington thing, but it is really a both sides of the Cascades issue. Some of those projects even included some tide gate funding as well, which we know there's existing problems, not only up in the Skagit area, but in other areas of the Puget Sound. And so seeing some of those monies develop is great to see as well. I believe Senator Schessler is one to credit there for working on some of those issues.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Caleb nailed it. And I just want to highlight in our business. So over here, everything's kind of connected. So remember, we talked about environmental crimes. The number one proponent for environmental crimes is who? The chair of the capital budget. She can make or break any of those things at any moment that Caleb just talked about. So it's a nuance for sure. And I let her know in December, and when we were meeting with her, hey, I appreciate her work with Senator Schessler to provide for irrigation infrastructure. We had a good session in that regard in the capital budget last session, and this year, just like he said, over $20 million for irrigation infrastructure. Some of those projects on the west side, really big deal, right? Tide gate money, it was just phenomenal, and money for conservation as well. In addition to that, I'll say this. Like over $2 million for a plant services building for WSDA over in Prosser. In addition to that, like 4.6 million for what they call climate smart ag. And that's with CCA dollars. We don't like the source of the funding. We've never supported that, but the money's there. So it should, in our eyes, it should go to farmers. And you know, what are some of the kind of projects guys can get out of that? Everything from no-till drills to digesters to, if you want virtual fencing, things like that, or just even newer equipment if it can be better than old. So there's got to be a little bit of a climate connection there. But either way, that's $4.6 million for farmers. There was also another virtual fencing project. One's going to be on the west side. One's going to be on the east for $500,000. And I can't say enough. Senator Schuster has built a strong relationship with the chair of the capital budget. They work well together. But again, to kind of highlight my beginning point too, is everything's still sort of connected. So we absolutely wanted to see her bill die. On the flip side, we have to go about things in a way that we don't want to hurt our clients. We don't want to hurt farmers in what they could or what they may or may not receive in the capital budget.
Yeah, no.
Sorry to go on. I want to mention two things in the operating budget. Very upsetting this year. There was like $350,000 that went to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to explore recreation opportunities with taking out the lower Snake River dams. We adamantly opposed that. Over 18 ag organizations signed a letter in opposition to that. In addition, another $300,000 to the Department of Commerce to continue to explore energy advancement and what that would be with the removal of those dams. So we adamantly oppose that. It's a waste of money. We think it's ridiculous. Yes, it takes Congress to remove dams, but they continue to lay the groundwork for the removal of those dams. And we adamantly oppose it and will continue to do so.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I can appreciate that work there. Let me ask this. With regards to one, I actually really appreciate the comments of knowing and kind of seeing the behind the scenes, the nuances of, massaging those relationships, not just going in and saying, hey, I despise this bill and you burn a bridge. Oh, I need that bridge for other, anyway. Understanding that is very helpful. It's helpful for someone from my perspective who can be more of that communication advocate. I just want to go in and, hey, let's shine light on what's wrong and expose it and blah, blah, blah. You guys, you've got a seat at the table. You're working to build these relationships and develop those relationships. You need to have those long-term relationships. And that is something that I can deeply respect and really appreciate both of you guys, and the greater ag lobby group that really is, from the variety of commodities, really going to bat and working to work those relationships, know where to push, but where to also mend some maybe broken relationships that have come in the past. So I really appreciate that. One of the things, and I kind of want to move, you mentioned, I forget which one. One of you mentioned the in essence Washington Farm Bill that Representative Reeves put forward. Sounds like she put it forward even at the beginning of session. This wasn't some sort of last minute bill that came forward, but unfortunately it didn't get a hearing until really after cutoff. And that was one of the things that I know we were looking at. I know several in agriculture were watching, and there's kind of this frustration, honestly, with there were several bills that were problematic, bad issue bills that came forward right at the beginning. And right out of the gate, you feel like, okay, we're already playing defense. why wasn't a positive bill? It was not a perfect, it's not the silver bullet that's going to cure all our problems, but this was a good bill, is a good bill that agriculture could get behind. One, is there any input on why a bill like this was not prioritized the way it should have been? And then two, looking at, one of the things that we've been looking at with Safe Family Farming is the recent ag profitability numbers. As you guys are very aware, and many of those that are watching this, agriculture in Washington is 50th by a long shot on the list of all 50 states. We're in the red about $400 million this past, in 2024. And I'm assuming this last year probably isn't going to be significantly better. It would seem like that's a huge crisis that legislators, this should have been front and center on. We've got to do something to revive the second largest industry in the entire, economic, industry and impact in our state. And yet something that would have moved the needle forward, and that was kind of seen as almost more symbolic. What is all that to say, what is the relationship with, this bill or, positive bills to kind of help move us into a more profitable status? Are there conversations going on? Were there conversations going on during the session? What is that going to look like going into interim? What's being done about that issue?
Yeah, on the Farm Bill front, that was something that I guess you could say Farm Bureau started with, but definitely checked in with the rest of the ag associations in the fall, making sure there was other concerns that maybe we didn't catch from our perspective or from our membership. It's House Bill 2616, I believe.
Correct.
And if anybody has an opportunity, please go find it and watch that hearing quick and watch Representative Reeves's presentation as she's the prime sponsor. One of the longer ones that you will definitely see with a House representative introducing a bill. And yeah, there was a myriad of issues involved in that. We addressed some CCA funds that we'd like returned to farmers and getting some exemptions on the fuel. There was delaying the hydrofluorocarbon implementation, specifically for some of those potato and onion sheds, which Mark is very familiar with. I believe there may have been a eminent domain piece to it. I believe there was and there was ideas that we threw out there too that didn't make it in the final version of the bill. And that's what some of these interim conversations will be about. And there's different perspectives. Washington, our state legislature is a one topic per bill type system. We can't present these omnibus type packages. And so there was a little bit of heartburn around that. It's like, how do we put so many topics into one bill and put support behind it? And then the other thing is, it comes down to the money. We're asking for more CCA exemptions, or the ones that we deserved from the get-go. That includes the lawsuit that Farm Bureau is still involved in, waiting on a decision from the state Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, the agency is going to see that as revenue taken out of their pocket. And in a budget deficit year, that's something that would be extremely hard to do. Same with the eminent domain piece. What's easiest versus what makes the most sense is another example of that. But that's what those interim conversations will be for. We can refine some of those ideas. Does it mean it's going to be in a solid one bill going forward again with all these different issues? Maybe some of the issues will be pulled out and be single topic bills. And that's one thing Representative Reeves has already mentioned. Again, as associations or as citizens, we can present our ideas, but they have to go through a process. They have to go through nonpartisan staff for the legality of it and how it's implemented. Then it has to go through the sponsor and or the caucus and other leadership, and they'll throw their own ideas in there. And so we presented this bill, and then all of a sudden, over 50 pages of it turned out to be about cannabis. That was something we were not expecting as ag associations, as an ag lobby. It's like, okay, where did this come from? But she has already mentioned that piece is going to be pulled out, and that will run under its own title, and we'll get back to the table with the rest of our topics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just chime in. Really appreciate Farm Bureau's work on that. In addition, I mean, I could tell you wheat, cattle, potatoes, onions, tree fruit all came forward and put ideas into that bill, and she was great. I mean, she was working that all during the interim. I think to get to your question, Ben, like what happened, because by the time it was heard, it was not going to, deadline had passed. And I would speculate, one, it's a huge lift in a short session. So this was the 60-day session. There were a lot of things at play. I just think, and to be able to educate that massive caucus, right? And to say, yeah, this is important for you to put your money and your time and all that into this. I just think too short a time period and more education to explain to those legislators, look, this state farm bill is really important if you want to save family farms in this state. And I know in that caucus, smaller family farms are I would speculate more of a priority, and they're the ones we're losing rapidly. And I think one of the biggest surprises to me of all our colleagues, and this came out in the unionization bill, was TILF united with agriculture. I can't think of a time. We've never been in opposition, but never really been united. But TILF came forward and spoke on behalf of agriculture, saying, "Please don't do this. This is going to hurt our farms." For those that don't know TILF, and that's really the smaller organic guys out there, we really appreciated them pulling the rope, with the rest of us. So that was certainly a welcome surprise.
Nice. And Mark, to your point, it sounds like the work, this bill is probably going to be ongoing, and there's work going to be done during the interim moving into next session. We're assuming that this will be reintroduced. Obviously, we'll have a different number and the wording will be a little different, but we'll be following it up and hopefully re-seeing this again next session.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of along that, let me ask this. We got, 10, 15 minutes left. What were some of the maybe lessons that you guys learned this session that you learned? We talked a little bit about, kind of fine tuning some of the relationships, or maybe learning, a little bit more on the relationships that you have with the legislators. Were there any lessons you learned, maybe in particular with working with the other commodity groups all coming together, the various commodity groups, commissions, associations, kind of coming? You mentioned partnering, TILF, the TILF Alliance coming in and really advocating and building that partnership. That's beautiful. So were there some lessons or kind of takeaways that you guys learned from this past session that you say, hey, I want to build on those or develop those further into the interim as we move into, future sessions? Mark, let me start with you.
Well, I think it just highlighted again to me, you can fight ideas. You can go against ideas without going against people. And sometimes that is super important here in Olympia. I just want to highlight, man, we're against bad ideas. We're not against people. And I think if that was really highlighted this session, and there's just a time and a place. And also, I'll tell you, there are things, this was not on my radar at all. You never know what you're going to end up involved in here in Olympia. A lot of folks know I represent the cattlemen as a client. I've been one of my first clients since the very beginning. Out of the blue, Chelsea sends me a 57-year member of the Washington Cattlemen's Association. He's advanced in years. He's got a 100-acre ranch in North Bend. He said, "Mark, I'm not gonna be on this planet this much longer. I love my family, and I want to have a family burial ground on my property, but it's against the law." We've always been pro property rights, and frankly, the guy just captured our heart, and he had a bill, and we were able to push that through the session. And even though there were a lot of urban legislators that scratch their heads and we don't really get it, this doesn't. But in the end, that bill is it's sitting on the governor's desk right now, waiting for his signature. I only say that. And by the way, he came over personally. He testified in committee in the House. He testified in the Senate. That made all the difference in the world. There was just some lobbyist up there saying, we think this would be good for families, but he came, it made the difference. So I only tell you that story just to go, you never know. Every session is different,
right.
Anyway, I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
No, but that's a really good point. The ability to be flexible and to kind of move, and you didn't know you were going to be advocating for a family burial plot this session, but it was a win, and it made a difference to this family, and it's something that we can celebrate. So that's really
it's a people business.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a people business, and it made a difference for his family, and it was a win for private property owners across this state.
Yeah, no,
that's what you want to do with your land. You should be allowed to, but it turned out good.
Good. No, that's fantastic. Caleb, how about you? What were some of the takeaways or lessons that you guys learned?
Relationships, interim relationships. It's just always, there's a solid reminder there. It's like, all right, where did these ideas come from? Specific example being like the PFAS bill, the rodenticides bill, the paraquat bill. Those are all three based around kind of same tools that we use in agriculture to help keep our food supply safe and secure, and look forward to working on further relationship with Representative Parsley. Oftentimes we haven't been that far apart on issues. She is a vet. She is a veterinarian. She's very familiar working with animals, that sort of thing. Very smart, has a science background, all the qualifications. And how do we bring her more into our fold, meeting with some of our people, with some of the farmers across the state, to help ensure the relationship and the tools that we need to keep on the table.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And I love that perspective of, high value for people, and separating the person from the idea or the issue. We can attack a bad idea. We want to oppose bad ideas. But we can work with, just about anybody if you come to the table in some form of good faith. So that's fantastic. That's really good to hear. Now, okay, so the session is over. Obviously, there are bills on the governor's desk waiting for his decision or his signature. But for all purposes, the interim is here. What can individuals watching this? What can we be doing what are some issues maybe that we should be keeping an eye on as we're working this interim, kind of keeping our finger on the pulse a little bit as far as we are able to? What should we be watching during the interim? Maybe what are some ways that we can be engaged? I say we as in, what can the farming community be engaging with? How can we be hopefully taking more of that offensive approach and, setting the framework for a real solid foundation for, next session, maybe building on some of the wins, some of the lessons learned, some of the key takeaways to really get us stronger in next session, 2027. Anyway, what can we be doing during the interim? What should we be watching, and how should we be really setting ourselves up for a strong next year?
Pay attention to the ag associations you're involved with. If they're asking for stakeholder perspective, try to get to that table or try to recommend somebody for that table, because we're trying to get as much information as we can. Yeah, the interim seems long, but you guys know you're out in your fields, you're out tending cattle, you're busy. We all have lives. But to be involved in some of those precursor ideas before a bill is drafted, before we're in next session, try to get involved in those conversations with your associations and the relationships you have in district, out of district. It doesn't matter, but staying engaged is one of the most crucial things you can do. 2, just to plug, try to grab some of those conservation dollars that are out there. Specifically riparian grant program with State Conservation Commission, working with your conservation districts, working with some of those other nonprofits. If there's grant dollars out there, try to soak those up for farming. In the bigger perspective of things, when those dollars disappear, they're easier to renew. And on voluntary basis, for what our associations have been advocating for, we want to support those voluntary conservation buffer type issues versus a hammer coming down from a perspective we don't prefer. And then lastly, and I know Mark can harp on this a little bit harder, pay attention to those close races. We have about a half dozen solid retirements happening across the legislature, and there's probably a dozen more that are questionable. We don't know if people are going to rerun or not. This is going to be a big election cycle, especially coming off the tail of that income tax decision. Yeah. So there's going to be close races across our state that could be very crucial and help implement or form policy that is very beneficial or detrimental to agriculture next year. But nonetheless, stay hopeful. Again, the budget deficit, I would argue, ultimately helped agriculture this year, and we want to continue helping agriculture into the future.
No, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, no, Caleb, that was phenomenal. I couldn't agree more. I know all your viewers watching right now totally shocked. Olympia is not always based on logic and common sense. It can be based on a whole lot of other things. Yeah. But I will say, I mean, the entire House of Representatives is up for re-election. About half the Senate, as Caleb alluded to, a lot of changes. Get involved where you can. You know, man, we are hungry for moderate candidates, and a seat here and a seat there, man, could really make a difference up in the Senate. And look at that in the Senate. I would, the 42nd district up there is going to be a hot race. We're looking for people that we can work with. And I encourage people, and I say all that, but we can't forget our friends either, man. There were a lot of our friends on that House floor for almost 25 hours battling against the income tax and doing a lot of other things. And it's important that they need our support as well. And I know the associations will reach out, and the associations all have political action committees. People, as distasteful as some may find that, it's also really important to engage, because that's what we're battling. Some of these these environmental organizations and all them, they are funding their political action committees in a really huge way. I know folks are hurting. I wouldn't ever suggest anybody do something that is too far for them, but if you can support those PACs in those associations, it really means the world and makes a difference for us to be able to support candidates. It just costs a lot for a political race, right? They got to do signs, and they've got to get on the radio, and they got to get on TV, and the cost of that is through the roof. Or if you can even put out signs in your area for a candidate you believe in. I couldn't encourage folks enough. Do it. It really, all those things are helpful, and it makes a difference for the upcoming legislative session.
Yeah. It's not the most, sexy thing to talk about, but the finances really do speak, be it to Caleb's point, if the legislature is working hard, you have advocates who are fighting to make, state dollars available. And if the farmer doesn't take advantage of that, money next time it comes around, people are going to look at it and go, well, no one showed up. So I guess, no one wants this money. And that resource will be removed. Similarly, candidates and campaigns that needs the money. And so, yes, your presence and your voice has a great deal of power, but so does, like we're saying, so does your pocketbook. So,
and we are the Farm Bureau, other ag organizations. We're on a buffer work group. If you folks remember, a few years ago here, they tried to do mandatory buffers. Would have been a massive loss of farmland. That has not completely gone away. There's a work group that continues. Ag is at the table, but so are the tribes, so are the environmentalists, and so are the agencies. It's not going away, and we will likely reach out to actual farmers. I know at the end of the month, the Ag Caucus in that group is meeting with the Tribal Caucus in that group. As they still continue, I'll try to stay off my soapbox, because I have to give kudos to our farmers out there, because as Caleb said, There's been there's $50 million in the last budget cycle, 25 to the Conservation Commission, 25 to the Office of Recreation. We got more farmers that'll do it voluntarily than they got money to spend, but they're really zeroed in on the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of that guy that I have not met that might not do it. And so I think it's frustrating to us to focus on some tiny infinitesimal piece of that, while I still got more farmers that will do voluntary projects that will benefit salmon than they got money to spend. So anyway, a serious issue, and we'll likely reach out to farmers to join us at the table on that. We'll see how that goes.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, guys, let me. We're out of time, but I do want to, give another minute, 30 seconds. Is there a kind of just a message that you would want to share with the ag community as we move into this session, just to kind of end our time in, kind of give you a closing thought. Caleb, let me start with you, and then Mark. What would you leave us with as you, take a breath and take a sigh of relief now that the session is over? What can we kind of leave this session with on our mind?
I would just thank the producers out there that are battling this every day. We get out of bed, we head outside, we get the work done. We're supporting our families while we're doing it, and they get and deserve all the credit. I'm going to ask them to stay positive. There are some things that we're working on that are definitely going to make things better. And one piece we didn't get to cover today, we needed another 2 hours to cover all the topics. But there's things moving in the mental health space as well that we're trying to make sure there's funding available, trying to make sure there's resources out there. Please check on your neighbors. It's really important. But nonetheless, whether they're showing signs or not, it's really important that we keep our communities together. Maybe that's one neighbor, maybe that's 10 of y'all. It's really up to you. But it's not all doom and gloom. We're still here to live and fight another day. And there's a lot of people working on your behalf to make that happen.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reminder. Mark?
Absolutely, man. We do what we do for the farmers and ranchers across this state, and I cannot thank them enough for doing what they do. In my mind, they're doing the hard work. They're the ones that are really fighting the real battle, and we want to continue. We're going to be their partners, to be their voice up here in Olympia, and continue to fight for them and continue to grow our partnership to bring them into the right rooms with the right people. So I know it's tough out there. Hang in there, my friends. We're going to keep fighting the good fight. Just be sure, man, we all got to stick together. And that really came through, I think, in this legislative session was ag unity. All of the commodities sticking together, not getting sidetracked on some small thing, but being able to support each other and move forward as agriculture in this state. It's critically important. Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you both. Yes, we have nothing but respect and kudos to the producers out there doing the work that you all represent, but you are doing some hard work of representing this important industry. And really thank you for the time and effort that you put into the years, but in particular this last session, as we're focused on that. And really appreciate both of you guys. Thank you for your work. Thank you for you do a phenomenal job, and I am honored to call you a colleague. And thank you for giving up an hour of your morning to chat with us and really kind of pull the curtain back a little bit, shine some light on what was going on this last few months. And hey, I hope you get some time off. Maybe as we represent farmers, and from what I understand, cows still need milked, and the ground still needs tended to. So hopefully you get some relaxation in there somewhere, though, as you represent this industry that we all really appreciate. Really appreciate you both. Thank you guys for giving us some time.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Dylan. Really appreciate Safe Family Farming. Appreciate your guys' time and the work that you do and your friendship. So really glad to be a part of this.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I do want to just let individuals know, if you are watching, we appreciate you taking some time with us and tuning into this. Check out safefamilyfarming.org for more information about our organization. If you have any questions or comments, or if there's any way that we can better support you or represent you or communicate what's going on in your neck of the woods, reach out to us. You can send us an email, info@safefamilyfarming.org. You can also use the QR code, sign up for our monthly email, as well as getting alerts as things come up. But again, we really, really appreciate the opportunity that we've had to share with you this morning, or whenever you're watching this on the replay, and know that Safe Family Farming is here working to support you, along with the Farm Bureau, along with Mark Struley and the various commodities and associations that these guys represent. We really appreciate the team and the partnerships that we all have together. And with that, we will call it a day, and we'll look forward to staying in touch soon. Take care.